Assalamualaikum warahmatullah everyone. We will continue from where we left in the earlier videos. We were talking about the sustainable development promoted by the United Nations, and our focus has been the SDG number 8, where the emphasis is on the business enterprise and entrepreneurship as the basis for economic growth and employment creation. So we are trying to find out what can be the contribution of Islamic finance into this area of the United Nations. And I was trying to put ALBAY into the middle of the project here to ensure that we are still putting focus to the Quranic foundation of Islamic finance and banking, and that is ALBAY. So ALBAY is what the Quran has prescribed over RIBA, and we must find a way how to bring this ALBAY into the ecosystem of the 17 social development goals of the United Nations. Of course, they will welcome any fresh input from the Islamic tradition, and it is here that we want to emphasize on the business enterprise and entrepreneurship as the attributes, as they are the attributes of ALBAY that the Quran has prescribed over RIBA. So when we look at the definition of entrepreneur, that is a person who undertakes the risk of starting a new business venture. An entrepreneur creates a firm to realize their idea, what is the business model, known as entrepreneurship, which aggregates capital and labor in order to produce goods and services for profit. So we can smell the ALBAY character in this definition of entrepreneurship, where the entrepreneur is one who is risking his capital, and there is an idea of combining capital and labor, in order to produce goods and services for profit. So we can always recall, the contract of Mudaraba, where the Mudarib is the entrepreneur, and the capital will be injected by the capital provider, the Rabul Mal. So entrepreneurship, will always embrace the concept of Mudaraba, which we will try to see that will be the very, accurate contribution of Islamic finance, to SDG 8, because the Mudaraba contract is a contract that combines human capital and money capital. So we want to humanize the entrepreneurship, to give more focus on the human element, the innovative element of the business, which is carried by the human being, the entrepreneur. So ALBAY here is very relevant, and we do hope that Islamic finance, leadership can take some time to think about how to, to structure or to develop this Mudaraba financing arrangement for economic development. We can see also that when we look at the ALBAY as the foundation of Islamic banking, I have been trying to bring this idea of risk-taking behavior, that whenever we are looking at ALBAY, we are referring to a transaction where the merchant or the trader is risking his capital, and there is no guarantee that the entrepreneur, or the merchant will be able to make profit, like what RIBA has done by way of contract. So the profit of the business is subjected to the demand and supply forces. There is profit and there is losses. So that risk-taking activity, that risk-taking venture, will naturally make the entrepreneur more innovative to be more disciplined and able to sustain their business and to try to stay away from any kind of negligence, and irresponsible behavior that may jeopardize the business, right? So ALBAY, as the foundation of Islamic banking, contains these three elements of entrepreneurship, that is, people who are risking their capital and people who are innovative in order to survive the business. And we can also see that the evolution of the Mudaraba financing, we don't have to go to the Mudaraba financing. We can just go into the plain vanilla ALBAY and to see to what extent that in the Mudaraba framework that the Mudarib is able to obtain or able to mobilize enough funds to undertake the project, right? Because in a Mudaraba contract, we got the Mudarib, who is the entrepreneur, who run the business, who know the business, who have experience running the business, but he do not have enough capital to fly it, and therefore capital need to be mobilized from the people in general, that is the capital provider, and these are the Rabul Mal. So how can capital be mobilized by the Mudarib in order to fly the project? So I'm looking here from our perspective, the common people. We don't have to look at the big corporates and big businesses to inject capital into the Mudaraba project. We look at simple people like us who have some small savings, and that can be accumulated to form capital for the Mudaraba venture. And one way is to look at some of the note I've made for you here. For example, our personal income can be coming from our wages and salary, okay, that is from our human capital. If we have some property or land that we have rented out, so we will be earning rental income. And if we have some money where we have invested in stocks and businesses, so we will be getting some profit. And thus, the personal income will be the sum of the wages, salary, rental, and profit. Let's say it is equal to $120,000. And the disposable income is what the income that we can spend, right? And that will be after deducting tax. So suppose the personal income is $120,000 and tax payable is $20,000. So the disposable income will be equal to $100,000. And then we know from economics that disposable income is equal to consumption plus savings. So consumption is what we spend on our food and our shelter and our basic necessities. And we may have some surpluses, and we call that saving, right? So our savings, where can we put our savings? So savings as money capital. Saving as money capital. The Quran says Allah has allowed ALBAY and prohibit riba, right? So we can see from the equation that the disposable income is $100,000 after tax payment, and let's say that the consumption is $80,000, and thus the saving now is $20,000. So we have saving of $20,000. The issue here is, the question here is how do we treat the saving? Where the saving will be put into, right? And the Quran says that Allah has allowed ALBAY but prohibit riba. So it can also mean that the savings must be put into ALBAY. For the believer, saving must be put into ALBAY and not to be put into the riba, right? So savings cannot be put in the bank deposit with interest. Saving cannot be used to buy bonds with interest. Saving must be put in ALBAY. Of course, we can also opt not to do ALBAY, that is by holding on our cash balances, right? But cash balances will incur costs, which is zakat. So you can see that our cash balances may decrease over time if these balances were not invested in productive investment. Our saving can also be put into gold and some other asset, so that will be the choice of the respective owner. But in general, the law says that if you have savings or surplus, then the option is to do ALBAY and not to do RIBA. So Islam desires savings to be injected into ALBAY, that is trade and commerce, and not RIBA. Right? So where will you put your money then? Of course, in the Islamic bank today, we will put our money in the bank deposit. So if it is Islamic deposit, it's okay. You will be able to obtain the HIBA, but not to put money in interest-bearing deposit, because that is haram. We can also invest in stock market. We can also invest in unit trust, in real estate investment trust. All these are ALBAY, right? These are all investment in stocks, in unit trusts, in REITs, are all ALBAY. Investing it directly into the business enterprise is ALBAY. So this is how dynamic is the Quran when it is directing the Muslim to put their excesses in ALBAY and not in RIBA. Because in RIBA, it is immoral, it is unjust, because the return from RIBA is a return without the taking of risk, whereas the return from ALBAY is where risk is conducted, risk is observed, where there is a prospect of loss and a prospect of gain. So finally, we can see that after 40 years of Islamic banking, there is absolutely no footprint on entrepreneurship, on Mudaraba, on Musharaka. There is unrelentless focus on Sharia contract screening. Of course, I have been saying this all the while, that the Islamic bank was set up as a deposit-taking bank, and therefore, when the bank do Mudaraba, then the capital requirement will be exorbitantly high. So Mudaraba contract is not viable, since bank funding is based on debt. There is a deposit fund. So using that fund to do Mudaraba triggers exorbitantly high capital charges, leaving Mudaraba financing in limbo. So startup financing, that can actually use the Mudaraba concept, it would be in limbo, because the bank, the Islamic bank, could not afford to do the Mudaraba due to the high capital requirement accorded by the regulator, right? So we cannot blame the Islamic bank. The Islamic bank, due to this limitation, they are providing financing to business enterprise using collateral-based debt product. Again, we can see that when the business enterprises were not able to pay their debts, there will be foreclosure, and there will be impending bankruptcy if the business is not able to pay up the debt. Okay, guys, let us stop here. We hope that we can continue more discussion on this important matter. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.